1, 2, 3, 4.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That's right, the big dick is here. Get ready. May we start?
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Tasty Tuesdays Talk. I'm one of your hosts, zbrah, and I'm going to get right into our wonderful guest today. He's right beside me. He goes by Greg McGoon. He's a children's book author, an actor,
Sure.
photographer.
Yeah, did that too.
What else should we add to the list?
Maker of things. I do design work. I do more like scenic for shows, movies, entertainment.
All right, so how are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I already had a busy morning, but now I'm here and I'm excited to talk about whatever the world brings to us today.
All right, so where would you want to start?
Oh my goodness, where do I want to start?
Do you want to start from pre-diapers?
Pre-diaper. Once in the womb, there was an eager child.
Did you have a...
I mean, we can dig into anything. I can say like children, like how do I do everything? Well, you may ask that. No. Let's see here. Let's start with.
Well, let's just start from your childhood.
Okay.
Where you, like just the basics. You know, where you're from.
Where am I from? I am from LA County, Claremont. Born and raised.
You got a local boy.
Local, that is true. Claremont, I would like to consider, I guess because I'm like obsessed with the Gilmore Girls TV show, it gives me like subtle like Stars Hollow vibes only on the West Coast. Love that. Yeah, so born and raised Claremont, spent all my time through high school there and then San Diego for college. And then right after college, I moved to New York City.
And what brought you to New York?
Well, lots of different things. Theater, but actually modeling was what took me there first.
Fashion, commercial, editorial.
All the things. Yeah.
Underwear?
So, I mean, in my private time, no. Yeah, so after college, I basically, in high school, I was a theater kid. No, like I was that stereotype, very much like a Glee thing. In high school, really, I would not be where I am today without the high school that I went to, because a lot of that has basically influenced the work that I do currently. And I'm still... Like, you know how in high school TV shows, you always like after they graduate and then they're like, how do we keep this going? Like, why would they show up back to the school? That's me. Like after I graduated, I was still like at the school. I still spoke to teachers. I helped out at various functions and events.
After you graduated?
After I graduated high school, I was still involved with my school. And I'm actually directing a show at the high school that I went to. I just cast it and it will be in March of next year. So I still go back to the high school. I still have ties to it. Even though I don't know like students there, I just still like to contribute to that school because it's great. And as I mentioned, I do design stuff and all that. And that is mostly all thanks to my high school scenic teacher, who after I graduated brought me onto some of her projects, and she freelanced with Disney and Universal. So I kind of got swept up into that world thanks to her. And my high school theater teacher she speaks around the country on educational theater, so she's always been in my corner and champion.
So you feel you're her replacement.
Oh no, I'm definitely not her replacement.
No, when she's not at school.
Oh, well, I mean, yeah.
Kind of.
Not. I mean, they have like their new teachers, and my former high school teacher, she just retired last year. End of like last year was her final year, which is strange to think. But now I'm like back once again directing my third show at this high school. And the new teacher is fantastic. And one of the scenic teacher now was actually kind of a former like CSTA, children's theater program that I used to teach at. So so it's kind of like just a tight knit group and we recycle through.
So this was all happening right after you graduated, because you said you went to New York.
So right after I graduated, so there's a lot like... There's a lot to kind of like unpack with that. So right after I graduated,
what was your plan after you graduated?
That was after high school. I went to school in San Diego, so that wasn't very far from Claremont. So
what were you studying in San San Diego. Is it theater?
No. So this is where we take a turn. I studied political science and psychology and then ended up with my degree in psychology, which I eventually use, but we'll get to that.
It's almost like a theater degree.
Pretty much. Well, that's the thing is like my entire background in like high school or from basically I was in a children's theater program in my hometown at the age going into 6th grade. I want to like 10 years old or whatever. So I did this program and I loved that program. I was in it for 4 years. CSTA no longer exists, but I was in it for 4 years. After I was too old to be in it anymore, I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to come back. I want to stay. So they let me be an intern as when I got into high school because that was the age cutoff. So now I'm like a freshman in high school, and during my summers, I'm interning at this program. I interned for a few years, then I got my own class. So then I was teaching over at that program, and then I got to be assistant director of the program. So I kind of worked my way up through the ranks of that, and then my friend. One of my closest friends who I've known since I was 10, Olivia took over the program, and then like the two of us basically like revamped it and like made it the greatest ever. No, but we really enjoyed it and we did it. And then she went on to become a full-time teacher, and I was like, I'm moving and leaving.
So, I mean, so you're in New York. Where were you? I mean, you moved there.
Oh, yes. So anyways, that takes me back. Let's go back to psychology for a second. So while I was in college and I gave up all my like theater stuff because I was like, I'm going to focus on academics this time. And I was loving it. I didn't even think that was like a thing that I would keep my interest, but it did. And I was kind of maintaining a little bit of that creative side over the summers, but my school stuff didn't until I fully committed to psychology as my major. And then my presentations there, I brought my own lighting for some of them. So I definitely turned my psychology like research topics and presentations into full-on theatrical shows sometimes. So I knew that that was a part of me that I couldn't get rid of, even though I really enjoyed psychology. And I got an internship at the Child and Adolescent Services Research Center. Ooh, say that every day. Where I also like was brought on to a few research papers with the actual psychologists and doing research for them, which was great, especially as an undergrad to be able to be brought on to papers and all of that. So I knew that after I was done with college, I did very well. I don't know. I graduated top. Yeah. Anyway,
of course you did.
I just enjoy that. Not like the top, but I was like, what was it? Like top 5%?
Well, there's 5%.
Yeah, I think it was top.
And there's 10%.
Top 5%, you know. I wanted to like, not, but I worked 3 jobs and I was an RA the whole time, which was the greatest experience of my life. So it really was like,
We're getting to know Greg.
Let me tell you about that one. No, I loved being an RA, but that's a whole like.
Yeah, we can skip that part.
But it's actually one of the
RAs are fun. I think I had a great RA when I was in college.
Oh,
she let me do everything. She was super cool.
Well, I mean, I wasn't like do anything. I was just like.
You're not cool then.
Well, I still talk to some of my residents. Let me tell you, they're great. And some of them have kids now, and they're like Uncle Greg, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, we were a really close family, like as the 5th floor. So it sounds crazy, but I've actually written a TV pilot based on being an RA. Like this was a very pivotal time in my life. So.
Was anyone terrified of you?
No.
So you were cool.
I mean, I was fun. We did a lot together. We were like, there were like rumors that were like the 5th floor is a cult because like my residents, like we all went out to dinner together. We all went to haunted trails together. We went to random activities together. We went to like the San Diego rodeo together. So we actually, we had like a softball team together. So we really
What else did you do together?
Stop. No, yeah, nothing inappropriate. I mean, like they for some reason we became a close knit family that they basically were like, oh, Greg can solve any problem that we want, and it was just like a test. So like knocking on my door at like 2 a.m. There's a bug in our room, or can you cut my bangs, or like okay, sure, why not? And I never like.
Can you cut my bangs?
Yeah, that actually happened. I cut people's bangs. Like I had co-ed residence girls.
What about pubic hair?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I like retroactively trying to get me kicked out of college. Like we're sending your no. So yeah,
I said it could be a good sitcom. You know, I get all requests.
Oh no, I heard stories about things that happened, but I was not one of the ones participating in some of those stories. But
You
Anyways,
get free room and board, right?
you do.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, I had my own private bathroom. I loved it in that little room up on the top of the 5th floor with my people. So anyway, that's
what the show should be called.
What?
The 5th floor.
That's what it is called. Like
There
that's
you
what
go.
like I submitted the pilot as. Yeah.
Nice.
So it is the 5th floor. The only thing that's tricky about doing that and working on it and like writing it and developing it is, but now I guess with so many different streaming platforms, you could do it as like an anthology series because you only keep one group for a year. So like one season would be like one freshman class. So you really are like, if you're invested in those students, they're no longer on your floor year 2. So it's tricky to.
Well, that'd be a good concept too, because you would have to get a new cast, almost like American Horror Story in a way. They do have new cast, right? And they change the story. So it'd be something like that.
It would be. You would do.
And it'd be something different because there isn't really anything like that that I
No.
can think of besides American Horror Story.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of what I had in mind, where you can keep the RA for at least 3 to 4 seasons, depending on what you need, and then you can just
Or you
rotate
could
the
drag
cast.
out years as well.
Well, you could do
Semesters.
You could
quarters.
drag it. Yeah, you could do. I mean, do what Pretty Little Liars did and keep them in high school for like 7 seasons.
And you could
So,
play yourself.
pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, goals. Not really. I would feel so uncomfortable. I'd be like 40 years old. Hey, kids, I'm your RA.
That'd be the funny thing.
It's
you know,
true.
You could be telling the story, and then it goes back, but you're playing yourself telling the story.
I could do that. That's like very like almost like meta Wonder Years type of thing, where it's like the narrator of the thing, but I'm just, or like Pen 15, that TV show where the 2 girls who created it are adults playing themselves as like middle school kids. So I mean, we could do that with like a college themed one. Although that might make it more slapstick kind of like humor.
Wouldn't it be a comedy?
It would be a comedy, but there would be a lot of heart and almost like, I call it like a fusion of Gilmore Girls meets My So-Called Life, like in a college residence hall.
Dramatic and seriousness. Because I'm assuming you heard everything and people had crises and girls and guys and especially in college. You, like you said, you hear it all.
Oh yeah, no, I dealt with.
Did you have to deal with anyone like trying to take their life?
I dealt with like pretty much everything you can imagine. And that was tough. There was rape situations where girls came to me, and I mean, my university was kind of annoyed with me the way I handled it, because the way I handled it was the roommate came to me. This was one situation. It happened multiple times, which is very unfortunate. But one situation, well, a roommate, like their RA wasn't around at the time, and I was there. She knocked on my door, and she said, "Okay, this is a situation. My roommate just went through this, and she's really shy about it. She didn't know what to do, and I'm not sure what to do." And I said, "Bring her up here if she wants to talk about it, and I'll deal with it." And she talked her roommate into coming up, and I said, "Okay, this happened. What do you want to do? Do you want me to talk to the university? Do you want to go to the police? It's up to you." And she said, "I like to go to the police." And I just took her in my car and took her straight to the police. Didn't tell the university, which is frowned upon. But you're
supposed to tell the university first. Correct?
I was,
and they want to deal with it.
Exactly. And I mean, in those situations,
they want to cover it up. They want to push it on the rug.
I'm not going to say they're going to try to cover it up, because my university was very aware and respectful of that.
Some universities, though.
Some do, not mine. Yeah. I loved my university.
Just like your high school, you loved it.
I really did. I genuinely loved it, and I had good experiences. So that those people who didn't have good experiences at these particular schools, like
you can't relate.
Yeah, I don't relate to that, because I really did enjoy it. But when you have a woman crying in front of you who just went through a traumatic thing, it wasn't about what I wanted to do. It was just making sure that she felt protected and taken care of. And that's what I did. And I waited at the police station for 8 hours, and then I brought them back. And and she's still on my Facebook. So I still see her.
She's still in
her life.
The 5th floor club.
And pretty much. But she wasn't even one of my residents. I had like surrogate residents from other floors who joined us. So, I mean, I dealt with a lot of those situations, and just, I mean, I would assume, I mean, this was not the case for other RAs that I was working with or like in my building. Like there were other RAs who were close with the residents in different ways. I don't know. I guess I just have that natural tendency to be like, is everybody good? Like, what are we doing up here? And I felt like protective over my residents. So, I mean, I had a nickname and like they had a t-shirt made. It said Papa Greg.
I was going to say
So
Father Greg.
Actually, Father Mike, I was at a Catholic university. Father Mike literally lived below me.
Yeah.
So that would have been a little weird at a Catholic university to be like Father Greg. But I was Papa Greg on a t-shirt. And so we were all very close, and that kind of shaped a lot of my time in college and everything else. But after college, I was like, I want to get back to my creative roots. And I was dabbling in modeling through college. I had like a secret life outside of college because I never dated one person at my university at all. So I kind of had a secret life, and somebody.
So it's a small school then?
It is. It is
Pretty
a small school.
You said Catholic school.
It was Catholic University of San Diego. I'm not ashamed of it. I love that school. So University of San Diego is where I went.
Count?
At the time, I want to say it was like 4,500 or something for undergrad.
That's like a big high school.
Very
large high school.
Very large high school. My high school was like 2,500. Right?
Yeah, depending where you are. California might have some schools that large. Maybe not.
For high schools, I'm not.
Maybe like 3,000 tops. Yeah. Maybe.
I want to say it was like 4,500 or a give or take.
What was your graduating class in high school?
430 something or 450 something. So, but like I knew pretty much the majority of them. It felt
4,500. Like that's a tiny school. That's a tiny university. Yeah.
It's
like an upgrade of high school, basically.
Our undergrad courses and just kind of general 101 courses were 30, 40 people in them.
Versus the 200 at a large university, 300.
Exactly. I never had that experience of like sitting in a class with like 300 students. On the first day, most teachers knew your name, which gave it a kind of like a close knit tight. And like I knew my professors. They do know when you're gone. I like never missed. I was one of those people who was like, I never missed class.
I was the same way. I always felt like terrified I was going to miss something, even though I knew exactly what was going on that day. You know, because you had the syllabus, and I was just always had to be there, even if I was like up all night. I'm like, I have to be to class. I have to be to class.
Absolutely the same. And that's the thing is like by going to class to every single one of them, my study time outside of class was cut in like a third because I basically was prepared for everything. So people who missed class were cramming for tests.
They need homework. Can I get your homework and all that?
And most of the time they like tell you what's going to be on the test if you show up to class, especially on days when a lot of people missed and they're like, oh, there's 5 of you here today. Okay, well, let me tell you what's happening. So there was benefits to it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So you think that it's more time consuming to like go to every class. It actually saves you time in the long run because you don't have to overthink and prepare for tests as heavy. So I found it a benefit. But I wasn't a big partier in college, I would say. So although Mexico was down the street basically, and my freshman year went almost every weekend because our class count was about like 60% female, 30% male. So, and most of my friends were female, then like a group of girls going to Mexico on their own was frowned upon. So they always were like, Greg, come with us. And I was like, I was just there last night. They're like, too bad we don't have a boy. I'm like, okay, I don't know what I'm really going to be that helpful with, but sure, for optics. And I would just go to Mexico like multiple times, like a week with different groups just because I was fun and made sure nothing went wrong.
Well, so from what you've gathered from right now toward all the way until you were in New York, seems pretty great. I mean, everything is.
There were overarching great things.
I'm sure, but the highlights, you have really like vivid highlights.
I do.
So
I wouldn't trade a lot of that.
Mostly, like I said, like you're saying, if you don't like your high school, if you don't like your college, there's people that go throughout school just didn't like school.
Yeah. And
they just went and got their degree. And
I did actually contemplate leaving and going to a creative arts university, but I'm thankful I did not. And I stuck the course and became an RA. But then after graduation and like a lot of tears and going like, what am I doing with my life? I said, bye parents, I'm going to New York. At separate times, they were divorced since I was 10. So it wasn't like I sat them together in a room. It was like, I'm doing this. It was more of like, this is what I'm doing.
So they got remarried or?
No, they didn't. They were just doing their own things.
Yeah, again, got remarried.
Oh yeah, they did get remarried with other people. Well, my dad got remarried. My mom has been with her current partner since I was like 12-ish, I think, 12. And then, my dad unfortunately has passed 2 years ago, and you're well aware of that. And thanks to my dad, he introduced Burning Man to me. So that's a whole other topic that we can get into because that's always fascinating to me. because no one would have expected like my dad's the reason why I go to Burning Man.
I remember, yes.
And I'm thankful and grateful for him because we didn't have the strongest relationship growing up.
Is that why do you think you were the kind of a father figure in all these different groups and being RA? Because
that's an interesting thing. I didn't even think about that, but possibly. Yeah.
You stepped up the role that maybe your dad wasn't there when you were growing up.
Yeah.
And now you were the father figure of all these, people that weren't that much younger than you, but you were always like that. Whether you go to TJ or your RA or.
Yeah. Well, now that I think about it, you're right in a sense, because here's the thing about my dad, and we can go this direction if we want to. Whether or not, like, him being a good man is not up for debate. He was a good man. He was a wonderful person in general. Was he the best father? Not necessarily. I have an older brother, and that put a strain, at least, on my childhood.
How much older?
He is 6 years older than me, but he wasn't really in the picture. I know because of that, like, once my parents got divorced, he kind of, I don't know where he went or what he did. I kind of have some recollection or vague memory of it, but he wasn't really around past me being the age of like 10, 11-ish. But I know it was just a point of contention in our family of just some of his antics. I'll just use that term politely. So I basically had to raise myself. They were prioritized, like unintentionally, they kind of prioritized his situation and what he needed, or whether it was going to prison or what. It was just kind of his situation. And I was getting straight A's. So they're like, let's not mess with this other one. He seems fine on his own.
Did you have to take care of anyone?
No, not during childhood. I kind of just took care of myself. And again, my mom always did paperwork for me. Like, that wasn't an issue, but she was working, kind of living her life. And my dad was just kind of doing his thing, and we just had tension. So in theory, it was like, I'm more my mother's child. And yeah, my dad, I showed up with, but I always just kind of had some weird tension with him. And not because of like my sexuality or anything like that, even though that never was discussed in my life with my parents. It was just kind of, I'm just going to live my life and hope for the best. So my dad during high school saw me with men, women, all the things. So it was just kind of never really like formally like sit down and talk. It was just, well, he seems to be fine and happy enough. So why question it? Yeah. So my dad and I he just basically, but you can kind of just see that like my dad wasn't always aware of what was happening, despite him just being a good person and just being supportive in terms of he gave me the freedom to be me. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts a parent can give a child, besides actually like being more active in the role. Yeah. So like there are parents who are very active in children's lives, but then also have such severe boundaries that like children can't actually pursue or like live their life authentically. And meanwhile, I had ones that were a little bit more hands off, but just said, well, as long as you don't screw up, have fun. So yeah, it's give take. And I think probably I liked the idea of feeling connected and close with people, and that protective nature probably came from not really having that growing up and being like, how can I help? How can I do this? And yes, I'm aware it can be overbearing. And that's what some of my first year being an RA, some of the reviews came back doing like, please don't share this because he understands us so well. He'll immediately know who this is, even though it's anonymous. And we love him, but sometimes it's just like, he's not our father. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm aware.
It's not a bad quality, but it derives from somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
And,
it all does.
And from childhood right there. So, yeah. I just noticed it when you were just describing it, to me right now, but there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a good quality. There's not a lot of people that are caring for others, So for you to have that quality, it's a good quality. I'm sure it goes far in other things, in relationships in your life and people you meet.
It can. And it can, but it's
kind of... But it may be too much. Like you're saying, it could be too much.
Sometimes it can be too much. And that was kind of where my dad kind of had those same qualities where he overcompensated with people. But I think part of it was he knew that our relationship was strained while I was growing up. that he then channeled that energy and that parental guidance almost on others, because he knew with me, he couldn't really do it because I was independent. So I was like, I don't need you. So that's what was always interesting is I know that like the way I behave sometimes is very similar to what my dad does. And the irony there is like, I didn't get that same behavior, but I learned it from him. So it's just.
How does that make you feel?
Honestly, well, at the time I was kind of like annoyed by it, but then knowing that I had the freedoms that I had. So there's something.
I mean, we all do it. There's things that remind me of how I act of my father. So, I mean, it's like I think if you're aware of it, it's okay. If it doesn't, it shouldn't bother you. I don't think.
No, it doesn't. It definitely doesn't bother me at all because my dad was beloved especially because like I said, he introduced me to Burning Man and he had been, was it 6 times before I first went? I want to say maybe 5 or 6 times. And I just remember thinking that was crazy. I was like, my dad of all people, like he is so like suit and tie, straight laced, and I'm like, what is Burning Man?
Do you remember when the first time you found out he was going to Burning Man, or did you find out he went to Burning Man after he already went?
I didn't know what it meant when I think he said he was going. I was living in New York during all this time, so I was flying back from New York to continue doing the children's theater program. During the summers, except for the first 2 years of New York. And then after that, I started flying back to California to keep with theater stuff. And that ties in with that children's program. And also in March, the California State Thespian Festival. They flew me from New York to California to do scenic workshops and be in charge of that.
Papa Greg.
Papa Greg is back. So, like I said, like so things kind of coming, like the circle comes back. The universe keeps on
pulling you.
So, let's see here. At this point, this would have been 6 years after I graduated high school. I'm now getting flown back to school to do the California State Thespian Festival, which is an all like state thing, but for high schools all over. It just happened to be more local to growing up. So it was easy for me to come back for that because I was just in my hometown and able to get to the festival. So so I really was that guy who just was always kind of came back and was like, hey, everybody, it's like, this is like a family group. And there was very much the Thespian Festival had a very family feel to it. And the CSTA program now that Olivia and I were basically running it together, and she can do anything and brilliant teacher. She and I, we had a family unit there and I was involved with it for so many years. So despite the fact that my life had so many detours in it, there were some key constants through it. So that's why it's hard to kind of describe certain things because I'll tell one story and then be like, well, that was happening simultaneously as this other thing was happening too.
Well, I was asking you about your father.
That comes into play. Yeah, I know. I'm getting back to that. So, but yeah, because of, here's the thing though. When I went to New York, I wasn't really seeing him as much. But then because of the California State Thespian Festival and the summer program, I was now more frequently in California, which means I was staying at his house again. And that's when I kind of got to see what he was doing.
You saw the outfits and you saw the dust bike. What is this?
Pretty much. And I was like, what is happening here? But he was like, it's great. It's like an art festival. And I was like, sure. But I didn't research it or anything at the time.
This is the first year or when did you first find out? Because did he ever tell you?
I think he probably told me, but he would have told me for sure when I came back for the summer because it's the end of August and I was in town from mid-June to mid-August. So I would leave back to New York probably a week before he left for Burning Man the first time. So I'm sure he told me that summer, but I was like, that's interesting. And just kind of not ignore it, but just not really process what he was telling me. And I never saw him immediately after Burning Man. Oh, now I remember. Okay, so I didn't see him immediately after his first few trips to Burning Man. It wasn't until I moved to Ghana that I moved to Ghana. That's another story. So I moved to Ghana and that brought me back to California because I came to California prior to going to Ghana to prepare and get my stuff ready. And I was sublet my place in New York at the time. And at that point, I knew that my dad was going to Burning Man before that happened.
This
in
is like his third
2012.
time or something.
This is 2012 would have been there then. Yeah. So I was there for that, and then when I got back from Ghana, because there was like that was one of the greatest things too. Another story. But anyway, so when I got back from Ghana, I was there. When did I leave? I'm trying to now remember all the dates. Anyway, I was there for like 6 months, but then like reasons brought me back. But I got back in the new year, and I stayed at my parents' house because I wasn't in a rush to get back to New York, and I kind of was conflicted about life again. That at that point, my dad and I kind of had a moment of reconnection. So then when I eventually made it back to New York, I was just looking around at my life and said, okay, maybe it's time I try something different, because apparently Ghana wasn't enough for that. And I remember calling my dad and being like, the time has come. And within 24 hours, I had a ticket to Burning Man the following year. And then we drove together, and that changed our relationship forever. Because we were able to, in a 9-hour car ride or longer, kind of hash out some of those challenges that we had together.
Yeah, it's a long time.
But also,
a long time in a car together. So, and that you had some beef, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and
it
just
was
stuff to reconnect and maybe tell him some things maybe that you haven't before, and vice versa, maybe, right?
That was more of him shedding light onto
that would make more sense.
What his life was like, as opposed, because you
really had no idea.
No, I didn't know a lot of stuff, because a lot of, like, obviously I don't have children, but I can't imagine at the time where you have these outside stressors or things that are happening in your personal life that you kind of shield your children from. And you don't know all that in those strains. So as a child, you just think like, it's all about me. It's really not. It's like, it is for your parents, but at the same time though, they have their own challenges and obstacles.
Human beings, so.
And I didn't know a lot. I did not know a lot of that stuff that he kind of sheltered. So the drive wasn't so much to hash out beef as it was to kind of have a understanding of each other and where we're coming from, and just like what we love and what we like and what excites us and what keeps our interest and what our passions are. It wasn't so much of like, how dare you when I was this and blah, 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 blah. It was really just like understanding the person.
I would hope not going to Burning Man and be like, Dad, you fucked me over. I'm traumatized,
I'm not going to lie and say those moments didn't happen, but they didn't happen on the drive to Burning Man. Those
would just kill the mood, right?
That would. So I think my excitement about going there and asking him questions about that,
the curiosity,
and then the shock of like, you did what now? But my dad was never into drugs or any of that, and he really didn't.
What did he do there?
His passion, which I learned later on, is art, which I didn't realize growing up that my dad had such an artistic side to him, and he started developing that. But that was a coping mechanism and developed and really blossomed through his. I can just say it, miserable marriage. She wasn't invited to his funeral. So it clearly wasn't a good, they didn't have a good relationship, and they got divorced prior to his passing. So my dad had just kind of freedom, and he was, I'll refrain from using the language that he used of like freedom, but yeah, that passion for art and kind of self-acceptance and discovery of himself, and that time at Burning Man for him was for him to finally let loose and be free and do his art and be with creative people who just liked the world. My dad just loved the world and had this rich curiosity, and he felt restrained in his relationship, and yet he knew he had one failed marriage and was like, I'm not going to let it happen again. And I told him, I was like, no one's going to judge you if you get divorced. You're you're a good man, and people love you, and you should allow yourself. And he was so rigid on that one thing. He was like, no, I'm going to make this one work. And that fascinates me that he stuck with it. And it's not like he had kids to protect in this one. It was just, he was older and he was determined. And I was kind of telling him run while you can, blossom, look at who you are at Burning Man. Don't you want that to be a part of your daily life to some ability? And he was like, well, it's here. And it was branching into the other areas, but it just, for him, he finally knew that when he was diagnosed with cancer, he's like, okay, now I need to reflect and really live my final life.
Life-changing moment, when you have death on your front doorstep, right? So either you're going to live life or not, but your dad was he also worked at Burning Man too.
Yeah, he was a Burning Man ranger. So again, that's kind of like that caretaker vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And there are stories that the rangers still share about like this. Hostage is kind of like the raw, like a heavy word, but essentially like kind of talk down this bus that basically kept people like trapped in it for 8+ hours. And my dad was really the main person to be able to like kind of alleviate that situation.
One of the years he was.
One of the years he was a ranger. So
that's crazy.
He really saw it all, and he just stayed with people that needed someone with them and protect them. And I think that was him being able to be like the father he wasn't necessarily when I was growing up. So he really got to experience those moments with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like have resentment towards that, but it is fascinating to see how his life, like while I was growing up, he didn't have the ability, or I felt like he didn't give himself the freedom, or there were so many other strains that impacted his ability to do what was natural to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that caregiving side was very natural to him, but it became overbearing. And therefore, apparently I subconsciously got that and overcompensated with other people. And then so that is a whole fascinating thing. So he was a Burning Man ranger and beloved by that. And he did that for years and years. And while I was still there, he started his own camp, the Art Model Camp, where they did life drawing, which was one of his things to do. He developed Burning Man pins.
Life drawing is
like life modeling, drawing. So they had like a little stage thing and art supplies so that they had models go up and stand there and you can draw them in their time slots. He developed their camp pin that he designed himself. Really cool, like designs. And I'm like, who is this man that I'm discovering right now? Like, well, I want some of these qualities and I hope I do have them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of fascinating to see this person that I didn't see growing up, like now bring this world of Burning Man to me that really gave me freedom in my own life. Because I mean, I would have to circle back to like kind of who I became in New York and what that made me to then what I learned about myself going to Burning Man. And it was, some people think of it as just this giant party and this kind of rave or
Mm-hmm.
something. It's so much more than that if you want. I mean, there's enough people there that you really find, the people that you meet there find you for you. Yeah. And even though I see them once a year, I know if I called them in the default world at any time, they would step up and like show up for me. And it's remarkable.
I say it's basically there's something for everyone. And party is obviously a part of it.
Yeah.
But you don't need a party. You can go to the library.
Yeah.
Of all things, you know?
You can. There is libraries there. There is fine dining there. There is.
You do whatever you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be party. But yeah, there's a misconception, I think. And I mean, that's what gets thrown out the most.
Yeah.
I mean, because a high percentage of people are
because
going nuts out there.
I think what's shown and showcased too is just with like social media and whatnot. I think it's easy to show the flashy parts of it because you're not really
the art cars and the DJs, but you can't, without experiencing it, you can't project it to like what it is. There's no way. I was talking to someone about doing doing different experiences, and you can explain your experience, whatever it is, and people can get an idea of it. But until they actually do what you're explaining, then they're like, no, mine was totally different, and it was this, you know? So that's how kind of Burning Man, how I look at it. I mean, you can explain it. Everyone has a different story, right?
Yep.
Everyone has a different experience. So it's interesting how people try to like pin it down to people that have never been. And you can't.
You'll never know what it is. And you don't know. I mean, people have described their experience and they're like, oh, some of that I relate to and other parts of it I don't. And you can make it a giant party if you wanted to, like, sure. And that is what it is. That's not the foundation of it. And I don't want to be like a Burning Man snob being like, well, but again, like it blossomed out of something more than a party. And it's a community. So if you want to party, then party. But at the same time, though, you find community, you find bonds, you find understanding.
It's a long week to party.
You find who you are in a lot of ways. And I think for me, going and discovering it was, I mean, not to get too like heavy all of a sudden, but I think for me and how I had been living my life and like separately, I was able to like show up there and learn more of who I was, but also kind of
Self-discovery, a lot of self-discovery.
Reclaim my sexuality in a weird sort of way and reclaim like sex for me because of just kind of the way I know. I was like, let's not get into that whole thing. But now that we're talking about Burning Man, you might as well. But I think because of just kind of my history.
There's a party and there's the orgy tent.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. But no, I think that's just such a weird topic for me because it just, my not to dig into things, but there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for that in my life, despite it being a part of my life until I got to Burning Man and was able to value it for me as opposed to a coping mechanism, if that makes sense. So I think I was just the way
everyone uses it.
Yeah, it uses like something as a coping, and mine was in a physical way. And I think Burning Man allowed me to like recognize it as a like kind of, oh, like this has different weight and meaning to it than I think I've been using it more as a vice and more as a negative and harmful way as opposed, and the Burning Man allowed me to rediscover that and not make those associations. So for me, that was huge to like now be at the time, I think it was how old was I when I first went to Burning Man? 27 or 28 maybe. Yeah. One of those. So for me to be able to now like view sex as a completely different thing thanks to Burning Man is like shocking. Like to me that's
like, your next pilot.
I was like, I'm not doing this to harm myself, but it was fascinating to me how that kind of shed light on that for me. And yet there I was with with my dad at Burning Man, and he's like heard some of these stories. And I mean, this is just such a funny story to me. So maybe people will appreciate it, and it's a little graphic, but whatever. So there's this one like camp there. I don't know if it was there when you went, but it had they had like the Hulk, Superman, Batman, all with dildos strapped onto them. And you basically had to like suck on that, and they gave you a shot alcohol out of it.
These were people dressed up, or mannequins?
These were mannequins. These were not real people. They had like the fake ones that had basically.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me.
Honestly, I'm sure you could find that at a camp. People dressed like that and do it, but no, these were mannequins that were set up, and they had the things strapped around them that they injected like a shot out of them. So you had to basically, earn the shot. Yeah, you had to earn the shot by doing the thing to it. So at the end of it is like, so I was there with one of my dad's friends of all things who he invited. So me and this woman were like at this like camp, and here I am like playing with like these mannequins dildos to get free shot. Well, everything's free there, but to get them. And at the end of it, if you do a well job, they give you like a blowjob certificate. And I just remember my dad's friend when we're sitting on top of a bus, and he was like, "Oh, what did you guys do today?" And he was like, "Well, Greg got a blowjob certificate." And he's like, "All right." And I'm like, "This is the weirdest thing I think has ever happened in my life." That my dad is like cheering on that I like succeeded at this random mannequin by giving like the Hulk a blowjob. Like anyway, so that just goes to show you that who my dad was growing up would never in his mind even know what that meant to now we're on top of a bus watching the sunset, and he just thinks it's hysterical and wonderful that I like did this activity with this random camp. So if that doesn't change your relationship with a parent, I don't know what does. So that's just kind of the strangest memory. I don't know why I just thought of it, but yeah, that just shows a whole new openness between us that developed out of it, that he was so like, cool. And I'm like, do you even understand? Okay, sure.
What is the craziest thing your dad did? Did he ever tell you like anything that was kind of out there, or did you see anything that he did with that you were around?
I didn't. He was so focused in on rangering, and he was a ranger the entire time. Like when I started going, he was already a ranger. So for him, it was always sharing the stories of him rangering and the people that he met.
He was working.
He was working, and that's what he loved. It wasn't work to him. It was what he loved to do. So there's nothing wild that I would say he did.
No Hulk or Spider-Man.
No Hulk or Spider-Man with him. But again, he was married at the time, and he was very much like.
Well, I mean, that's not cheating.
I know that's true, giving Hulk, but that isn't my dad's style. So it may be.
Well, Burning Man.
That's true. It can be anybody's style. Burning Man.
It's like what happens in Burning Man stays in Burning Man, kind of.
Does it though? Because I swear people talk about that stuff out there. No, I'm kidding.
But you keep it on the low down.
I mean, no, I think my dad kind of owned everything that he did, but yeah, he really focused in on, for him, that Burning Man experience was to be a ranger, to be there for others, to be that support, to encourage, to motivate, to cheer people on. He was like a Burning Man cheerleader. Like he really just, that's what his kind of identity was. And that's kind of what he brought to the outside world after going for a few years.
Would you say he was more of an inspiration in your life later, in your adult life then?
I mean, the more I think about it, yeah, which is probably why we butt heads so much because I mean, like sometimes similarities end up kind of butting heads. So probably, yeah. I don't know why I'm like on this tangent so much about my father at this point in time, but hey, I feel like,
Where's your father? So,
yeah,
I mean,
it's just, there's a lot of unpacking to do there that I did, thankfully, because when part of why I left New York was his like cancer diagnosis. And then my lease was up and they raised the rent from $3,200 to $4,000 in one go. And it's like, is that legal in New York? Yes.
They can do it out here too, I think.
I think they can. I mean, there are some restrictions, but $3,200 to $4,000 is absurd. And I already had 3 other roommates. So there was 4 of us and 4 of us with a like
and this
whatever.
is in Manhattan?
Yeah. So, but then going to 4,000.
Imagine how much it is now.
Or yeah, it's, I don't even want to think. And we were an unrenovated unit and they were trying to like raise it. And before the 32, it was 24.75. So they just like kept just going. And I had been in that apartment for 7 years. So I had been in New York for 9, 7 in the one place that I loved. And then my dad got his diagnosis and I was going through like a breakup and my lease was that. And I was like, it's time for change. Like I could move somewhere else in New York, but then I don't want to miss this with like my dad. But then coming to California, I felt like my life fell apart and then didn't know what I was doing. And then he like took a turn and then I moved in with him during his final chunk of time. So it was just like a lot. And then COVID hit. So now I'm finally like, after 4 years of being in California, finally feeling like now that the world's reopening, I can actually like start to open into the world again and really like commit to being in California again.
Like because you're doing the play.
Yeah, I'm doing the stuff, but like I'm kind of back in. Like that's why I like the stuff at the beginning wasn't a tangent because it's like, oh, you're back helping out with your high school. You're back into this because I had those relationships from when I was younger in that community, and that eventually I kind of was able to like kind of return to those that are like comfort zones in a sort of way. So I'm fortunate to have all that. So, and like now work is coming and like the woman who is my high school teacher for scenic stuff, she's the illustrator of 4 of my books. So, I mean, like, that's the thing is like she was like a mentor, the closest thing I had to a mentor who then started doing some assignments from me and I wouldn't be anywhere without her because she got me opportunities for working in design stuff. She helped me get my books off the ground. So she really took a turn. And like, I mean, you see that in like high school TV shows and sitcoms. Like our students really like that, like make connections with teachers who really support them. And like later on do that. I was like, I lived with her for 6 months after moving back from New York. Like she took me. So she was kind of that remarkable person that was there in my life.
Well, that's a nice segue. So we should, you are an author. So let's go.
I was actually getting to that, which is why I brought it up. So yeah.
Good move, man.
I think it was time to like switch goals on that one.
We could talk about Burning Man some more, but
no,
unless you want to like get into the real, deep part of Burning Man.
That'll be for, if we get enough comments and maybe, no.
But yeah, let's talk about your books.
So yeah.
How did you all get into it all?
Well,
the McGoonies
and all that. Yeah. So my books are a lot of that. And now that I gave a decent chunk of backstory, all of that backstory plays into this.
Yes.
And that's why it's all important. So I hope you were listening. No. So basically in 2012, before I moved to Ghana, I started developing a children's arts nonprofit. So creative arts for youth development, art centricity. And I kind of was doing that while I was in Ghana, developing this whole thing, because when I moved there, that's kind of what I was doing. And then that derailed and I ended up working with the National Drama Company of Ghana. Brilliant. Anyway, so while I was all there, while I was working on this nonprofit and developing it and getting it going, I wrote a little story for the website out of the box. And then that turned into a real book. And people were like, oh, you wrote a kid's book. I was like, it's mostly just kind of a story for my nonprofit.
Yeah. And what year was this?
This was in 2014.
Okay.
2014. So I had written this little thing.
Have you gone to Burning Man yet?
Had I been to Burning Man at this point in time? I don't I think this was the year. No,
The year before?
This is the
Year, like 2 years?
No, this was because it was right after I got back from Ghana that I wrote the first book. So no, let's see. 2014 was that. Ghana was in 2012, 2013, because the election was Obama's re-election was happening, and the
16.
presidential election was happening in Ghana simultaneously. And I remember going and
16's your first year.
Oh, 2000.
So I was just gonna say if it correlated with going to Burning Man.
No, I had been. Let's see here. So I had been 2015 would have been it, or no, it would have been 2014 would have been my 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, and I haven't been since 2019. So 2014 was my first year. Sorry. Okay. So I had just gotten back I had been back from Ghana for a year.
Okay.
A year, yeah. And I had developed this nonprofit. I'll tie it all together. Don't worry. There's gonna be a big bow at the end and confetti. You're like, really? So I'd been in Ghana for like a year and a thing. And then I was writing putting the finishing touches on this like nonprofit, not really knowing entirely what to do with it. And at the time in New York, I was doing my scenic stuff, but I was also acting. And then I moved in with this woman that I did a show with. And she just was very critical of everything. And I know that sounds like a weird detail, but her criticism about like everything was the reason why I started developing books, because she wasn't critical of me. And that sounds really bizarre, but for somebody
critical of your books?
No. And she actually thought it was a good idea for me to move forward with it. And I'm like, the person that just like judges everything thinks I'm good at something? Like what? So there was something like we bonded doing this show together, and I lived with her. So we clearly bonded. We bonded doing the show together, and her kind of just enthusiasm and belief in me when she can watch like Oscar nominated movies and being like, tear it apart. And I'm just like, but she believes in me and what I'm doing. So that kind of propelled me to want to do more books and like go deeper with the nonprofit. So I did that. And then one fateful day on the subway, I was also at the time teaching improv at a little like children's theater program in New York, after school program, while all this was happening. And I had an art therapy book and I was reading it on the subway just to kind of figure out other like little activities I can do during improv. And I know like, why art therapy? But I was just kind of curious about that. And it was like, is this a field I'm interested in? And I was reading it, and that's when I wrote my Tangelos series, or at least the first book. And at that point in time, when I got off the subway and I was helping my friends paint, and I showed up, they're like, oh, your first book is so cute and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, I think I just wrote another one. And I think this is what I want to do with my life. And it was that moment that really like shifted it, because I was kind of had my foot in like everything in New York. And the Tangelos came to be, and and that book series is all in rhyme. And it's like kind of mental health awareness for children in a playful sort of way that doesn't really shy away from darker tones and themes. And then when I wrote that and people were like, this is really good, what should I do? I wanted to write a fairy tale. And I was like, I'm going to do a fairy tale that has like gay princes in it. And at the time in 2014, 2015, this wasn't really a big thing. It was just kind of getting touched on in children's books. And I was struggled for the longest time doing it. So I just scrapped all that and I said, okay, I'm going to just like go back to the basics. Once upon a time. And I was like, once upon a time, there was a king and queen. And I just started writing. Next thing I know, and I had a meeting with somebody who was in the book world. Actually, that same day that I started writing Once Upon a Time. And I just whipped this thing out, and it was maybe like 3 word pages, enough for a picture book, but it was just like a writing activity for me. And I went to this meeting and I said, okay, here's what I'm working on. It was the Tangelos stuff. And I had literally like the ink was smudged off the paper that I wrote the Once Upon a Time like story on it, because it was that fresh from the printers before like racing to this meeting. And I showed the Tangelos stuff, and she's like, this is great, but it's too long. And I'm like, it's the same length as like a Dr. Seuss book. And then she was like, kids don't read anymore. And I'm like, that's sad. So I was like very like confused by this meeting at first, because they're like, love what you're doing, but it's like going to be a hard sell. And I'm like, I get it, but I love it. And they're like, well, that's great. And then I said, she's like, what else do you got? So I was like, well, I literally, like, I was like, I have this that I'm playing with. And she read it and she just like pushed it across the table and she was like, this is your story, release it. And that was The Royal Heart, which ended up being the second book I released, but the third one that I wrote. And that got a lot of attention in 2015 because it featured a transgender princess. And it wasn't because, and this was before the Caitlyn Jenner transition. So it wasn't as media frenzy over it. It was a story that I wrote that just kind of had that Cinderella moment of transformation of a royal child discovering their true self and becoming that. And that blew up more than I could have imagined. And it got picked up by, first, when I was doing a scenic job, the woman that I was assisting, I was like, oh, I write books and I did this thing. And then she was like, oh, well, let me see it, because I have a friend who who writes for Hello Giggles or something. And that's Amy Poehler's blog. And she like read the book and she was like, I love this. I'm going to do a story. And then it just kind of spiraled after that. They're like, new children's book features first transgender princess. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not a transgender fairy tale. It's just a fairy tale with a transgender princess, because I wasn't trying to talk on that subject. Because
But how did you explain that in the book?
Because the main features of this book are the king and queen have a child, and then on her 16th birthday, she runs away because everybody's in town, and she's visited by the spirit of her grandmother, who they go, well, did you talk to your parents? Did you do this? And I'm shorthand of this. And she goes, no. And it's like, well, maybe like be yourself because your parents want you to be happy type of thing. She returns that this is like after transforming and recognizing herself. And she's like, this is who I truly am. And the parents look at her and they're like, whether a man or woman, like you are a leader still. And then the king passes away and then she becomes queen. So it's a story more of compassion and love and accepting your child rather than on the transgender experience. That wasn't the goal. It's more for you to share that this exists of like people who aren't living in their true self. And also for people to recognize that that doesn't change who they are based on their gender. They're still capable leaders. They're still individuals with power and strength and all of that stuff. And they can be kings or queens, whatever it is that they are. And just because their gender is now presented other than what people were previously familiar with, who they are as a person is still living now their best life. And this has allowed them to do that. So that's the point of the story. It just was something tangible to showcase that. Because I mean, it's essentially a coming out story, whether you're like, you can share this as well, this character transformed from male to female because that's her true self. But it's that moment of like going to somebody and feeling safe enough to say, this is who I am. And if you're sharing that book with anybody in like LGBTQIA plus community, then if that book is read or if that book is shared, then like that's somebody, if they like this book, then there's somebody that you can share your true self with, because it's like, oh, well, we would be like the king and queen of this one accepting of our child. So then they go, oh, well, if then that's the case, then like this is who I am. And then they like hug and do it. Like ideal world. It is a fairy tale that it's not unfortunately that easy for everybody, and it's still so much strife and struggle with everything. But yeah, that's kind of where that story came to be, because I realized trying to develop a story with two princes, the fact that there were two men, I wasn't coming up with a story that I liked well enough, because any fairy tale really could just be two men, like done with two men, and it doesn't change the meaning or significance of the story.
Was it feeling forced?
It was. And that's why this little, very simple tale of a child like taking ownership of themselves and becoming transformed into her true leader and queen just flowed out of me very like straightforward, and it's the most traditional book that I've done. And that gave me the leverage after to kind of say like, I have other books and I really like these Tangelos books. And then I was like, because of the attention that got, I was able to like stick with a small publisher who was able to do these other books for me. And yeah, that kind of was really my passion, was in these Tangelos books, and they were used in some psychology children's programs, which aren't the intention, and then I just knew this is what I wanted. And there's 3 in that series. And then
what does a Tangelo mean?
Well, so the Tangelos are these little creatures that live in all of our minds, and they twist and turn all of our thoughts, creating confusions and doubts and everything that we kind of have that feeling, or when we have those feelings of really being tangled and knotted and just kind of our vision blurred from what we want to see and just struggling with all that. That's really the tangelos at action. And they're neither friend nor foe, but they just kind of feed off that energy. And because of the way they are, they get tangled and twisted together, and that like impacts the way we think. And it's working through like kind of what those thoughts might be and how to untangle them. So it's just trying to take those little critters and creatures that live in our mind and making sure that we're not like feeding that chaotic energy, creating that tangled mess that we may go through.
And that's what the mental health.
And that's the mental health. Yeah. So, and again, my degree in psychology, I wasn't intending to write a book for that. And I am not a PhD in it. I'm not a licensed psychologist in any way. But I mean,
but you're using your education that you had in your school, and it's influencing what you're writing. In
exactly.
books.
And I did send it to some psychologists who said they will and are using it in their programs. And so I can't testify to its ability to help in those situations, but I am thankful and grateful that they have found it useful, which is great.
Have you got any stories from parents or other readers saying, my children, like how it's affected their lives or something like that? Or?
Yes, I have. I know I've gotten a lot more emails about the Royal Heart, which is wonderful. And there were some Midwestern high schools and all that who did readings of it and readings at a community center, and it really helped, which was magic and wonderful to hear. And then as for the Tangelos, I got one email I always reference. It fascinated me. There's one parent who was like, we got your books and we really loved them. And after my kid read them, they came up to me and they set it down. They had a bunch of questions. So I would recommend that you include a workbook with like this Tangelos thing. And I just looked at the email and I was fascinated by it because it was like, then the book did its job. Because I wrote back, I was like, I'm so happy that you got your book and I'm so happy you were able to share it with your child. Don't remember exactly what I said because this was like 5 years ago. But I wrote like, well, I understand that your child had questions, and actually that's incredible to hear because that's really what I created these books for, is to open discussions, because I don't have the answers. And the book is intended to leave you with more questions and answers because it's your thoughts and your moods and what it is that they're struggling with and how the Tangelos are impacting them. So if I were to do a workbook, it would be more standard.
Defeat the purpose of it.
Yeah.
You don't want to explain it. You want the kids to ask questions so your parents can be parents and explain it.
Yeah, or the guardians to do it. Like the fact that your kid came to you, I didn't write this part, but in my head, I'm like, the fact that your kid came to you means there's something about it that they didn't maybe understand, and that it is a heavy book. And depending on the age range, they're not going to get all the subtext and context of it. So that's what I want, is them not to just read it and being like, that's nice, and then set it down. Like they didn't just set it down. They actually came to you with a question about like, what does it mean? It may not have been a question, like even if it was a word that they didn't understand because I used some elevated language in it, that's great, because then they go, oh, well, if they asked one question, then you can follow it up being like, do you have any other questions? Or what did you think about this page? Or if there's a part of it that you, like the parent, I did get an email saying like, this is one of the few books that I don't mind reading to my kid nightly because I take something from it. I'm like, great. So like that fascinated me too, that like parents ended up taking a lot from those books because I wrote them for myself. Like you never know when you write a book, and any creative out there, when you're doing work, you don't know unless you're part of like the Disney machine, like if like you're making it for the public. But when you're doing personal stuff, you're really doing it for yourself and hoping that like when you share it with the world that maybe somebody connects with it. But at the end of the day, you did it for yourself and it's something that you value and appreciate, and hopefully others will too. And I'm fortunate that my work has resonated with people as more people are finding out about it.
How is your creative process? Do you write these books fairly quick? Or I know the other Prince and Prince was forced, but
the Gay Prince one was forced, and it's not even a book. That doesn't exist anymore.
No, I know, but
so that's what I mean.
That's what I'm saying, for an idea. But
exactly.
When someone like the Tangelos, did you whip them out, or like how fast?
The first Tangelos I wrote in one subway ride in about 40 minutes because it just flowed out of me. Then it was a year of me editing every word, choosing the words, going through it, changing up the rhymes, reconstructing and like piecing it together. But the core of it and the heart of it came out immediately. And that's when I knew I was like, I've got it. And then the second one, there was parts that didn't make the first book that I ended up using for the second one. And then it flowed out of me. And then people were like, are you going to do another one? Are you going to do another one? And there was a 2-year gap between them. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really have it on my mind. And then I was visiting one of my former roommates who lived in Hawaii, and I was just looking at it. And then I was like, and I wrote it really quickly. And I was like, I've got the third one. And it's the heaviest. And you can tell when I wrote that, I was in a very dark place, trying to get myself out of it. So the third one is very heavy in terms of its themes. But yeah, that came out very quickly. So for me, I'll write all the time, but really I only know I have a story is if it really just flows right out of me. Otherwise, I'll just sit and stare at stuff and go, I hate it. And then after the Tangelos, I didn't know if I was going to do any other books, and people kept asking me, are you going to do any other books? Or you should do one about your dog. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not really my style, but who knows? And then plot twist, I did. Yeah. But there's a purpose to it, which then I didn't even know at the time, because during COVID, my adorable little dog developed or had diabetes. And that was a shock to the system and a financial strain, and just the amount of work involved in it is, yeah, he has not left my side since his diagnosis over a year ago. And what
is your adorable dog's name?
Oliver Gilmore, which is the title of his first book. And guess what? There's another book that he'll be featured in coming out December 1st. So if this airs after December 1st, it's already out.
You have it over here. Let's just check it out a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's true. So first, I'm turning away from the mic. So this is the first Oliver book that happened during COVID. And it's basically a story about Oliver, but also touches on diabetes. And I knew if I was going to do an Oliver story, or if I was going to do something about it, I want it to have a purpose. I didn't want it to be like, and there's the dog running down the street, and then Oliver played with this. And then, because that's great, and those children's books serve a purpose, and there's some incredible ones out there just about dogs. That's just, mine always have like some deeper meaning that is way over thought out. So the diabetes portion is like the second half of this book, and I didn't expect it to. It's been out for over a year now, and now it's starting to be used in diabetes programs for children, because it's bringing diabetes awareness to it. Even though it's a dog with diabetes, there's a lot of overlap there in the care and the heart behind it, because this is not just about diabetes, it's about compassion and caretaking and all the above. That now parents are just like, oh, this is wonderful for our kids, because now we can like have something to share with them, and it brings awareness to diabetes and how natural it is, and it doesn't change who they are. And thank you. And I said, great. Like, I had no idea this book would be able to be used for children for diabetes, and the amount of respect I have for parents who take care of their children with diabetes is remarkable, and just the constant worry and the demands that it requires. So that's Oliver Gilmore.
Yeah, like how in the end you explain it even more in depth.
Yeah.
So it breaks it down. You have a breakdown in
I
this
do
book.
have a breakdown, and I do have a breakdown.
You break down this book.
I mean,
but it's great because it is so informational, you know, like for someone that has no, like I didn't know. Yeah. And I learned from it. So that's a,
wow, thank you.
So, I mean, it does as it does its job, you know?
Well, I mean, again, I did it for myself, and I had the most incredible illustrator for this, Dave Reed, who he came through, and then like that connection was made through a friend that I had in New York that I had met once, and she linked me with him, and then it just magic happened, and now Oliver basically looks like a Disney character, and I even have my little Oliver pin on there to do that, which are available.
So talking about your illustrators, has it bounced around? Have you used the same illustrator from the Tangelos? Obviously, you said
this was a new person. The Tangelos I had mentioned, and the Royal Heart was my high school scenic ROP teacher. Okay. So that's again this is why like it all ties in. So you wonder like, why did he talk about high school for so long? And I'm like, again, I wouldn't have books if it weren't for Jessa.
I mean, you're still involved in high school. You're doing the play. So.
Jessa didn't do my first book because that one I just kind of did independently. And again, it wasn't really intended to be a big thing. It was more of just kind of like a one-off for the art program. But then when I had the Tangelos idea, I was like, this is what I want to do. And then when I said, okay, I wrote this fairy tale. Apparently it's like a thing. Let me try to like get some illustrations and see what happens with it. And then it escalated, and then it like got published, and the rest is kind of history. I was like doing interviews about like, then Caitlyn Jenner's news came out, and then like press was asking me questions, like literally Details magazine was like, what are your thoughts on Caitlyn Jenner? Like, what? Okay, this is a lot now. And I didn't have an agent. I didn't have representation. Publisher really was like small scale. So it was just like, okay, I'm literally in my inbox now, MTV 17, MSNBC News, like all these things, just like boom, boom, emailing me directly about this book and like transgender topics. And I'm like on panel discussions and I'm like, oh, but because of that, then I was like, Jessa, do you mind like working with me on this other book? And she was like, okay. And yeah, so she really changed my life on that one. And then Dave Reed came to be because I knew kind of I wanted I didn't even know. This was my own kind of passion project. I didn't even tell my publisher about it. So this one I did myself and I kind of storyboarded everything.
So you didn't go through your publisher on this?
I didn't.
This
one is self-done. And
how's this one doing? Well, obviously you said it's doing well.
It's doing really well actually, but I mean, dogs are easy to market.
Yeah.
Like abstract concepts about like mental health awareness for children, a little harder to do until people find the book. But like cute puppy, and then you have the added bonus of like learning something new. It really just managed to do it. And
so no Tangelo merch?
No Tangelo merch yet. I mean, I have big plans for those. The more people find out about it, like those I do have a lot of plans for. Are you going to make another... Tangelo? No, I think the Tangelo trilogy is done. The trilogy. I'm done with the teas.
You gotta do the prequels.
And the prequels. I have other ideas to do utilize the Tangelos because
it could branch off.
It can, and the Tangelos impact your emotions. They aren't your emotions. So it's one of those like if like this is like the next level of like Inside Out, like that Disney Pixar movie. So you have like your 5 like key emotions that movie does. Now imagine them now dealing with the Tangelos and twisting them together because it's easy to be like, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad to have. There's one, but emotions are more complex and usually they layer in value. And Inside Out touched on that slightly, but really that layering now and when it becomes kind of forced or situations come that push those emotions together, that's where the Tangelos come into play. So you start seeing that and you kind of find the Tangelos are interfering with your emotions and twisting them together so that you're like happy or sad or angry and sad at the same time. And
a lot of different emotions going on.
Yeah.
And then
so now that Oliver became a star in Oliver Gilmore, Doxy's Diary, and if we've noticed in this, the theme of our fairy tales that I do and I'm a fan of and love my Disney stuff and all of that, I had this idea a while back and I've been working on fairy tales and then through Instagram, and I usually do these things where I insert my books into like classic celebrities, which I did to the Tangelos. I started doing that with Oliver Gilmore, and I started putting, because he looked like a Disney character, I started putting Oliver in the random Disney movies, and that was really fun to me. And I said, wait a second, here's a thought. And this book kind of, again, this was a passion project, and like it has a little watermark because it's a proof. And this is the first cover reveal of it, but it comes out December 1st. Once Upon a Fairy Tale, tale spelled T-A-I-L, like tail. And it's an Oliver Gilmore adventure where Oliver is now transported into classic fairy tales and encounters 5 iconic fairy tale characters and disrupts their stories and find out how they all end and what happens to Oliver.
On his lovely adventure.
In this book out December 1st. And I'm really excited about it. And it's a big departure from what I'm used to. It's not a picture book, as you can see.
It's a great stocking stuffer.
Exactly. Thank you for saying that. It really is. It's $4.99, available in paperback or ebooks. And I think it's a really fun story. And it's like a puppy and princesses. Like you don't really beat that. And it's based off of the Grimm's fairy tale, like the original stories of it. And if you can tell by the cover who it's featuring, Little Red, you have a Briar Rose, Sleeping Beauty, Belle, Beauty and the Beast, Cinderella, and Snow White. You have these, and her name in the book is Briar Rose because in the Grimm's version, it's Briar Rose. Aurora was used in other versions in Disney. So the stories aren't related to Disney in any way, but again, pulled from the original fairy tales. So find out what happens to Oliver when he encounters these princesses and what happens to their stories afterwards. And does Oliver have his own happy ending? You have to read it to find out. So I love this and I'm really excited about it. And
this one
I'm really excited for it just because it's so different. And I think this story has so much growth potential and there's a lot that I can do with it. And I'm already playing around with other ideas for it. But this one flowed out of me so naturally, despite the fact that I had like 20 versions done in like a 6-month period. I had like 2 dogs at one point. I had all these things. I thought maybe I would do it as a picture book, but it just wasn't giving full life to these. And now I think this book is really funny. Like there's some fun moments in there. It's for early readers. I mean, like probably 6 to 10, but if you're younger, there's stuff you can read to it if you're not into pictures. And it's a visual book, so you get the idea. The cover is bright enough. So
is this Dave Reed?
This is also Dave Reed also did the cover for this one, and there's a few little like sketches woven into the book.
Okay, so it's more of a reading book then.
It's a reading book. Yeah,
book.
This is not like a picture book.
Okay.
It's just full early reader. But the few little sketches and just little like flares and touches to
and
it.
Was this self-published?
This one was as well, just because. I mean, if you hadn't noticed, I was basically like taking ownership of things. And sometimes I want to create. I don't want to sit on my have an idea, sit on my computer for years and then like navigate the whole world. And I'm very fortunate to have like.
You're in control of this, and you can release it when you're ready. And
exactly.
You have to go through anybody. But has the publisher?
No. I mean, like this surprise, it doesn't really matter. And it's not like a negative. It happened so quickly because I was so excited. I was like, I can do this. And oh my gosh, it's just like, it came together so quickly.
A lot of people, that's what they're doing now.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're your own boss, right?
Exactly. And and you honestly can like make better royalties when you do it yourself. Yeah. Unless you're with like a really top tier thing, but at the end of the day, like a small publisher, you have the backing of it, which does allow it to be in like independent bookstores, which like this can't be, unfortunately. Okay. So there are pros and cons. Like I'm thankful and grateful that my other books can like be purchased in independent bookstores, and you don't have to just buy them on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or something. Oliver Gilmore though is available Barnes & Noble hardcover and paperback through Amazon. And this is only available through Amazon, but like that's where everybody shops anyway. And like that, even like my books that you can get into an independent bookstore are still purchased majority of the time on Amazon.
That's what people do nowadays.
So why not just go to Amazon, keep costs down, and then have it be a thing? So yeah, this book came together a lot quicker than I thought. When things like really fall into place, I get excited for that, and yeah, so I'm just releasing it this year. And I mean, if it gets picked up by somebody bigger and allows me to repurpose and redevelop it and make it grow into something more, fantastic. But it's not going to do that just sitting on my computer waiting for somebody to say, this is great. I would rather just release it. And if somebody wants to pick it up and say, we need to make changes to it, I'll probably fight them, but then go along with it if it gets like a wider audience.
I mean, the sequel.
Yeah.
Be the next one.
Yeah.
Once upon a time again.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's just a straightforward thing. I'm excited. I think it's a fun story, and it doesn't change. It's not forced. That's all I'm going to say. It just like,
how fast was this one?
Oh, this one, once I knew what I was doing with it, it was a few days, but it was like 6 months of just staring at like garbage for a while. And then it was like, it clicked and I was done. And then I like got it to an editor.
Yeah. 2 dogs and
and then I got it to an editor, and then they were like, or I got it, like I had a couple like kind of pre-reads of an earlier draft, and most of them were like, it needs to be longer. And I'm like, thank you.
How many pages is this?
It is 55, but it's like big for kids to read. So again, a quick read, I think 4,000 words or something. So easy enough, like easy reader. If your kid is just like semi-interested in reading, but like doesn't like long things, this is really the perfect book for them, especially if they like kind of adventure fantasy type thing, or are familiar with these characters via Disney, because some of the stuff that Disney used for their fairy tales do overlap with Grimm. So the majority of the details I did use overlap between the two, but you'll notice the biggest difference is in Sleeping Beauty, because in the Grimm's Brothers, there's actually somebody at the spinning wheel. That's the big difference. So if you're wondering like, wait, there's not like another person spinning at the wheel in the Disney version, it's like, well, in the Grimm's there is. So that actually helped the story and actually was crucial to make this story work. So so it's great for people who are not that excited about reading, who want a fun story, and love it. Love this. So yeah.
So remind December
1st, it's available. Once Upon a Fairy Tale, and Oliver Gilmore Adventure. And so find out what happens.
And then how can people find you? How can they reach you, or your Instagram? Do you have a website?
I do. I really, social media gives me severe anxiety. So I only use Instagram at the McGoonies. So it's the McGoonies, my last name with IES. if you're going to have a last name like McGoon, you got to own it. And did not know that as a child, like did not make that comparison. But then people were like, you have such a great last name for children's books.
Well, did you ever watch The Goonies?
Of course I watched The Goonies, which is why I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to add the IES in it and be the McGoonies because it's like my, like Oliver and I, and we're just like the McGoonies, and I have like puppets and stuff, custom puppets. So so I use the McGoonies. That's pretty much, you can find me on everything through it. I don't use Twitter. I have one at the McGoonies. If you message me on it, I'll respond to it. I just don't scroll it and I don't have a following on that. So Instagram is the best way to reach me, or you can email me directly through my website, gregmcgoon.com, where it has, I think I still have all of my books, or at least the 3 Tangolos and the Royal Heart and Out of the Box, available to read for free on my website. I put them up there at the beginning of COVID so that people had access to them. And I haven't taken them down yet. So if you want to check those out, I do think they're better to read in hardcover and like tangible.
Of course.
But if you're curious about them, like I'm not going to like
buy the book. Come on.
Buy the book because, you know, kids like to hold things. And but if you're curious about what it is or what I talked about, go for it. Check it out online. That's why they're there. They're meant to be experienced and not just for profit. So so check those out. And I'm pretty easy. I respond to things, so I'm easy to find. And my last name's weird enough that like you really can't miss it.
Greg McGoon.
Yep.
All right, man.
All right.
It's good seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Great.
You're listening to Tastemakers
with Zebra and Geebs.